Getting approved for a house and being able to afford that house are not the same thing, and a lot of people learn that a little too late. By the end of this video, you should have a better way to judge how much house is actually safe for your life, not just how much a lender is willing to approve. A lot of people treat this like a math problem with one clean answer. What price range can I qualify for? What monthly payment can I technically make? What number will the bank sign off on? That approach sounds reasonable, but it can give you a false sense of safety. A house does not just take a mortgage payment from you. It also takes property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, furniture, utilities, and once things start going wrong, a surprising amount of mental space. So the mistake is not always buying some obviously absurd house. More often, it is buying a house that looks manageable right up until real life gets added back into the picture. That is why this matters. A house can be affordable on paper and still make the rest of your money life feel tight, exposed, and uncomfortable for years. A better rule is not to buy the most house you can qualify for. It is to buy the house whose full cost still leaves your financial life with breathing room. That may sound obvious, but people skip it all the time because approval feels official. It feels like permission. Once the lender says yes, the number starts to feel reasonable by default, but lenders are solving a different problem than you are. They are trying to figure out whether you can probably make the payment. You are trying to figure out whether making that payment still leaves room for a stable life. Those are not the same standard. One is about whether the deal can work. The other is about whether your life still works after the deal. That is the whole argument here. The right house is not the biggest one you can carry on a good month. It is the one you can carry without putting the rest of your finances in a chokehold. So what should count when you decide what is affordable? First, the real monthly housing cost. Not just principal and interest, but the full number. Taxes, insurance, HOA, if there is one, a maintenance budget, and higher utility costs if the property is larger than what you live in now. That is the number that matters, because that is the number your life has to absorb every month. A lot of people look at a mortgage estimate and think, okay, I can handle that. Then the actual ownership cost lands a few $100s higher, sometimes much higher, and the margin disappears. A payment that looked like $2,300 can turn into $2,900 or $3,100 once everything is sitting in the same monthly pile. The house did not become more expensive in some abstract sense. It became more expensive in the only sense that matters, which is what it does to your month. Second, look at your post-purchase cash position. This is where people get reckless while telling themselves they are being responsible. They pull together the down payment, cover closing costs, empty the emergency fund, buy the house, and tell themselves they made it. But if the water heater fails 3 months later, or your escrow payment jumps, or your income wobbles, the problem shows up immediately. A house is not just a purchase. It is an ongoing relationship with surprise cost. And this is where cash changes the feel of the same payment. If two people both buy the same house, but one closes with $20,000 left in cash and the other closes with $2,000, they are not in the same position at all. One repair bill is annoying for the first person. It is destabilizing for the second. If buying it leaves you with no reserves, you did not buy safely. You just made it to closing with nothing left in the tank. Third, ask what the payment leaves room for afterward. Can you still save? Can you still invest? Can you handle repairs without financing every problem? Can you survive 1 week or month without feeling immediate pressure? That part matters more than people think, because the danger of too much house is not always some dramatic collapse. Most of the time, it is slower than that. It is years of being house rich and margin poor. You have less flexibility, less investing momentum, and less room for life to be expensive in very normal ways. And that pressure changes how you behave. You delay investing, you postpone repairs, you keep credit card balances around longer than you should. You start saying no to useful opportunities because the fixed cost of the house is already eating too much of the month. That is what too much house often looks like in real life. Not one giant explosion, just constant financial drag. So here's the cleaner rule. A house is affordable when the full monthly cost still allows you to maintain cash reserves, keep saving, absorb normal repair costs, and live without your budget feeling permanently stretched. If the house payment works only when everything goes right, it is probably too expensive. Let's make that concrete. Imagine two buyers. Both earn $8,000 a month before tax. Buyer A gets approved for a payment that looks fine on paper. The mortgage itself comes out to around $2,200 a month, which sounds manageable at first. But then property taxes, insurance, and a small HOA push the real monthly cost to $2,850. Add a basic maintenance allowance and slightly higher utilities, and now the true housing burden is closer to $3,100 a month. That is before anything unusual happens. Now imagine buyer A also used most of their cash for the down payment and closing costs. So yes, the house works technically, but only if the car behaves, the roof behaves, income stays steady, and life stays polite. That is not real affordability, that is fragile affordability. Now take buyer B. Same income, same market, but buyer B buys below the top of the approved range and the full monthly ownership cost lands closer to $2,500 instead of $3,100. That is not cheap and it is not tiny, it is just lower. But that one decision leaves room for a cash buffer, retirement contributions, maintenance, and a little margin when life gets uneven. Buyer B may not feel as impressive on move-in day, but 6 months later, buyer B usually has the stronger position, less stress, fewer bad trade-offs, and more capacity to keep building wealth after the purchase instead of pausing everything for the house. And that monthly gap matters more than it first appears. A $600 difference in housing cost is $7,200 a year. Left alone, that disappears into the house. Invested consistently for 20 years, it can turn into a very serious amount of money. That is the part people miss. The bigger house does not just cost more in monthly payment. It often costs more in lost investing, delayed savings, and reduced flexibility. Now, does that mean everyone should choose the smaller house every time? No. There is nuance here. A household with very stable income, low other debt, and strong reserves can stretch more safely than a household with variable income, childcare costs, car payments, and very little cash left after closing. Someone with a stable salary, no car payment, and 6 months of expenses in reserve can take more pressure than someone with commission income and 1 month of cash. And a high earner may be able to handle a higher housing ratio because the money left over after fixed costs is still substantial. So this is not about forcing one percentage on everyone. It is about asking a better question. Not just what can I buy, but what can I carry well? If you want a practical way to use this, run the decision through 4 filters. First, use the full monthly cost, not the mortgage number alone. Second, look at how much cash you will still have after closing. If the house leaves you with $3,000 and one basic repair could cost half of that, that is a warning sign. If it leaves you with $20,000, the same repair lands very differently. Third, check whether you can still save and invest consistently after the house payment starts. And fourth, ask whether one bad month would create real strain. If the answer to that last question is yes, you are probably too close to the edge. A good house payment should feel sustainable, not heroic. It should not require you to become a perfect adult having a perfect year. It should work while you are still a normal person, dealing with normal disruptions. That is the better standard. Not maximum approval, not emotional excitement, and not square footage envy. Breathing room. And yes, that may mean buying less house than the calculator says you can afford, but that is not you falling short. It is you refusing to hand your entire financial future to one line item. A house should support your financial life, not dominate it. That is the better rule. The smart move is not proving how much house you can buy. It is buying the amount of house that still lets the rest of your money do its job. The goal is to own a home without shrinking the rest of your life to pay for it. That is a different standard and a better one. If this sharpened the way you think about money, subscribe. And if you want help deciding whether to invest or pay off debt first, watch this next video. Thanks for watching. See you on the path.